Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea continues to post strong exports. So far this month, up 30% from a year ago on semiconductors and petrochemical products. Shipments of cars up too. Data show jobs coming back in South Korea as the economy recovers, but according to the Bank of Korea, some changes in the pandemic, like automation and remote customer service, could be more or less permanent. And South Korea reports its highest number of new coronavirus cases for a single day at almost 1,800. And tests show the virus has infected 90% of the military personnel serving with the Navy's Cheonghae Unit, all of whom were brought back to Korea yesterday from their mission near Africa. It's 5 o'clock p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea's exports in the first 20 days of July jumped more than 30% on year, led by semiconductors and petroleum products. The Korea Customs Service says exports amounted to $32.6 billion, up 32.8%. By sector, shipments of semiconductors, the country's key export item, soared more than 33%, followed closely by automobiles. Exports of petroleum products spiked almost 70% on rising oil prices. South Korea is going to temporarily deploy more shipping vessels on U.S. routes to help out companies facing a shortage of capacity and to address a pileup of containers at Korea's ports. This was announced Wednesday by the Trade Ministry and the Maritime Ministry after a meeting with the shipping industry and local consignors. With the government, they agreed to put at least 6 more ships on the American route for the months of August and September. For July, a total of 9 more ships. There will be subsidies for the shipping companies who will operate the routes jointly and for smaller trading companies. The government also plans to secure extra ships for trade routes to Southeast Asia. Employment in Korea has been recovering in recent months. The number of people with jobs up 4 months in a row now. But according to the Bank of Korea, the pandemic has had some effects on the labor market that could be permanent, like more automation and less in-person customer service. Seung-hoon has this report.
The Bank of Korea on Wednesday reported that COVID-19 has led to 3 major phenomena that could have negative impact on the Korean labor market in the medium to long term. According to its report, the pandemic has accelerated job automation, threatening many jobs, especially those which rely heavily on face-to-face interactions, such as shop cashiers, telemarketers, and bank tellers. This trend was already happening before the pandemic. 2.5% of people working in occupations with a high probability of automation lost their jobs from April 2017 to October 2020. It was a contrast to a 2.8% increase in the number of jobs in sectors less likely to become automated. The central bank also said that employment at businesses with 300 or more employees has been on the rise, but smaller businesses haven't been hiring. Employment by businesses with at least 300 employees has increased by 6.4% compared to February last year. But employment by businesses with less than 300 workers has decreased by 0.8%. The central bank stated that when employment is concentrated in a few firms, it can make it hard for new firms to enter the market, which could drag down the total number of new jobs. Prolonged unemployment was also cited as having an adverse effect on the labor market. The number of people who have spent more than 4 months job hunting has increased by 26.4% from February last year to June this year. The Bank of Korea said that the government should help workers in occupations at a high risk of automation find new jobs and should find ways for SMEs to expand the size of their workforce. Seung-hoon, Arirang News.
The South Korean boy band BTS has been named special presidential envoys for future generations and culture. President Moon Jae-in made the appointment Wednesday, a move aimed at enhancing the country's public diplomacy and to lead the way in addressing global issues for the future generations.
President Moon appointed BTS in order to lead the way in addressing global issues for future generations, such as sustainable growth, and to expand South Korea's diplomacy, in accordance with its enhanced status in the global community.
And with that, BTS will take part in the upcoming UN General Assembly in September to convey a message of hope and comfort to young people around the world. The group will also step up in a range of activities to address global issues such as the environment, poverty, inequality, and respect for diversity. The Blue House said it expects BTS will spread hopeful and positive energy to people around the world exhausted from COVID-19 and will help boost South Korea's global status in the post-pandemic era. And the man who founded the entertainment agency behind BTS has more than doubled his net worth in less than a year since his company went public on the South Korean stock market. That's Si-hyuk, whose total wealth is now estimated to be more than $3 billion US. Part of that was one hit song after another from BTS. Min Soo-kyun reports.
Si-hyuk, the mastermind behind K-pop superstars BTS, has more than doubled his assets in the past 9 months. The 48-year-old's wealth soared following the much-anticipated IPO of HYBE Corporation, formerly Big Hit Entertainment, in October last year. Since the listing, the company's shares jumped over 130%. Pang, who owns almost 35% of the agency, now has a net worth of $3.2 billion US. The growing value of the company is indeed a clear sign of the global success of the boy band, who've seen millions of sales. The group's latest release, Permission to Dance, currently tops the Billboard Hot 100 chart, replacing another BTS hit, Butter, which held the throne for over 6 weeks. HYBE's global ambition, however, doesn't end here. In April, it acquired Ithaca Holdings, home to pop stars Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande. Following the $1 billion acquisition, shares of HYBE have been climbing further. With powerful artists under his roof and a strong global fan base, the company is expected to grow even faster. Industry watchers are betting on HYBE's global growth, saying that the recent merger with the US record label has helped boost confidence in the company. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
Rising home prices in South Korea have been a contentious issue for years, and so it's almost with a sense of disbelief that homebuyers have watched prices soar during the pandemic. That comes despite efforts by the government over the past couple of years, which include 26 rounds of policies to cool down the market. People in other countries have seen something similar in the pandemic. So what's driving prices higher, both in Korea and around the world? Our Kim Sung-min has been looking into the issue for us, and she joins us this afternoon here in the studio. Sung-min, good to have you back on.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, the Moon administration realized this was an issue a couple of years ago and started taking action, as I mentioned. Young people especially started to feel that the price of homes just put them out of their reach, especially watching prices go up in the pandemic. So give us a sense of how expensive homes are in Korea and how much they've risen.
Devin, before we start, I'd like to say that when we discuss the price hikes in the South Korean housing market, it's more accurate to limit that to the capital area. The house price gap between the Seoul area and the rest of the country is huge, and most of the market frenzy has been concentrated in and around the capital. According to a report by KB Bank, the price of apartments in the capital area during the first half of this year increased by almost 13%, the biggest rise in 19 years. And that has been driven mostly by the high-end houses. Last month, the average price of the top 20% of homes reached over $970,000. That's a jump of around 30% compared to a year ago. To give you a better picture, I visited one of the most expensive apartments in Banpo, Seoul. Here, just last month, a home with 84 square meters unit of usable space was sold for $3.5 million US. That's the highest price on record for an apartment of this size. If we break down the total space, that works out at more than $30,000 for 1 square meter.
Sung-min, for our American viewers, to put this into perspective, I can speak from that point of view. That's getting close to what, $3,000 a square feet, which is around 10 or 20 times what you would see in a typical American town or city. So, and this is something we've seen in many other countries too. Data just recently showed that the average American home price went up 25% in the last year.
Right, house prices are an issue all around the world right now. When we take a look at the data from the Bank for International Settlements, global property prices rose by 4% on year in the fourth quarter of 2020 when the pandemic was raging across borders. And the surge was more apparent in advanced economies. Real house prices across the OECD rose by 7% on average from the fourth quarter of 2019 to the fourth quarter of 2020. As you can see from the graph, that was the fastest growth over the past 2 decades. Some of the hottest markets were New Zealand, with real prices rising 13%, followed by Canada at 11%. The US also saw price hikes of 8%, and the UK and Europe both 6%. So in that term, South Korea's rise seemed relatively mild, standing at 3%, but that's partly because it was buffered by the regions outside the capital area. The BIS noted that although a rise in house prices during a recession is not unprecedented, recent increases have been unusually large.
Well, indeed, they have. They're rising all over the world. You know, in the American market, we know that one factor has been an increase in material prices, especially lumber. That's made it more expensive to build new houses, and in turn, that means used houses have also become more expensive. But I know there are deeper reasons for this as well. So help us understand what's behind the rise in home prices.
Well, experts have largely given 2 reasons to explain the surges. The first one would be how the pandemic has driven down interest rates to historic lows. Policymakers around the world have cut interest rates by 2 percentage points on average last year, which in turn reduced the cost of mortgage borrowing. And that monetary policy to boost the economic recovery, combined with trillions of dollars in physical stimulus, led demand to outstrip supply in many countries, just like here in South Korea.
After the pandemic, because Korea wanted to try to reduce the shock from the pandemic, Korea, along with most other countries, carried out a very expansionary monetary policy with low interest rate and high liquidity. And that's been feeding into the real estate market as well as stock market, cryptocurrency market.
Right, all kinds of assets. I mean, it makes sense that if it's cheaper to borrow, then that'll be reflected in a rise in prices. But there's more to the pandemic story than that. What else is going on?
Well, another reason that many experts mention is the increase in demand. With the lockdowns and the reduced opportunities to spend, those who managed to keep their jobs turned to property and, to be more precise, a nicer house. As the COVID-19 pandemic led more people to work from home, homes became their offices, schools, and gyms. So while the demand has increased, the supply couldn't keep up with that in many countries, including the US.
Housing production has been unusually slow, even coming out of the crash. So it's been at low levels, and there are different reasons for it. Some of it is it's become more expensive to build houses. Lumber prices have gone up. There's some shortages of certain types of labor. So it was the case even before this that house prices were growing faster than inflation, but not quite as much.
Right, okay, that makes sense. Let's look forward for a minute. Those who need to buy homes are most likely going to continue to buy homes, but it'd be nice to know under what conditions they'll be buying them. So tell us what factors are at play going forward and what might be in store.
Well, Devin, no one can really predict what's going to happen exactly, but we can consider various factors like potential rate hikes to at least guess the scenario. Experts say the overheated market is bound to fall as a housing bubble pops.
House prices will not go up forever. By 2025, the interest rates will be higher. Whether it is the US or Korea, the rate will grow by some 2.2 percentage points through the next 3 years. Then the tapering will come and liquidity will be reduced. The house prices by then will overshoot. And when the supply increases with the current government plans, there's a higher chance that the price will start falling.
Obviously, the big question is it going to be a bubble or is it going to revert back to some sort of average? The bets are on the latter. Of course, the former is a risk. The markets, again, are betting that if you look in the bond market, it's making bets that inflation will go down, that it won't be as high as it is now. Because if they weren't making that bet, interest rates would be higher. And they're just not high enough to be consistent with expectations of inflation.
Well, Seungmin, it sounds like there are some temporary factors at play, maybe some longer factors at play. But if prices do keep rising, it sounds like maybe they won't do so at the rate they have been, and at least that would be some sort of relief to people who are hoping to get on the property ladder. Seungmin, very thorough reporting today. Always appreciate that. A very interesting topic. Look forward to having you again next time.
Thank you.
South Korea today had its highest number of coronavirus cases yet, almost 1,800. That record's likely to be broken too in the next few days, rising possibly into the 2,000s. At that point, the authorities will decide what to do next in terms of distancing measures, which are already, in theory, at the highest level. Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea on Wednesday reported 1,784 new cases of COVID-19. This is the highest number since the start of the pandemic. Infections outside the Greater Seoul area are also on the rise, surpassing the 500 mark for the first time and taking up more than 30% of all new cases for a fourth day in a row. Health experts warn that the worst is yet to come, as the nation's daily tally is expected to surpass 2,300 by early next week. Experts say the increase is due to the spread of the Delta variant and with more people traveling outside the capital region. Local health authorities say they will wait until the weekend before considering whether to change or extend the current distancing measures in the Greater Seoul area, which are due to end on Sunday.
We will make a decision by the end of this week after closely monitoring this week's situation, along with various indicators like the virus reproduction number, as well as the amount of people moving around.
As of Wednesday, South Korea's total number of cases surpassed 182,000. There has been one more death, raising the death toll to 2,060. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
And more military personnel who are serving with the Navy's Cheonghae Unit near Africa have tested positive for the coronavirus. They're all back in Korea now, and 90% of the 301 crew have the virus. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Seoul's defense ministry confirmed on Wednesday afternoon that an additional 23 members of the virus-hit Cheonghae Unit had tested positive for the coronavirus, raising the total to 270. 19 of the 23 new cases were confirmed on Wednesday morning, with the other 4 cases coming from those members who had previously had inconclusive results. Only 31 out of 301 crew members have tested negative. This means 90% of the unit's members have been infected. Those with severe symptoms were sent to military hospitals, while those with mild symptoms were sent to treatment facilities reserved for COVID-19 patients. Those who tested negative were transferred to a military facility in Chine for a 14-day quarantine. Once the members of the Cheonghae Unit are settled and taken care of, investigations are to take place to clarify how the coronavirus had infected so many on board. The infection route is not yet clear, but Seoul's Vice Defense Minister Park Jae-min, in a radio interview with local media, suspected that the virus might have spread onto the destroyer when it was docked at a port in Africa between June 28th and July 1st. For more on how this incident unraveled and how the ministry is to go forward, a parliamentary hearing led by the Defense Committee is scheduled to take place next Monday. Meanwhile, personnel who were part of the extraction team departed from an undisclosed port in Africa earlier Wednesday morning after disinfecting the destroyer Mumu the Great. The vessel is to arrive in Korea in about 50 days. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
COVID-19 testing centers in South Korea are as busy as ever right now, and we're going through a week of intense summer heat. They're doing their best to help people stay cool, both the test center workers and the people visiting, by handing out bottles of water and parasols and setting up fans and air conditioners. Chae Won-jong reports.
Long lines of people with yellow parasols are standing outside a COVID-19 testing site in Seoul, waiting to get tested, and temperatures got to around 34 degrees Celsius in the afternoon. But that sizzling heat wave didn't stop these people waiting outside. Seoul's Seochegu district office has decided to hand out free parasols to help those waiting keep cool. To avoid dehydration or heat-related illnesses, the site has several coolers filled with water bottles.
What they're doing here is great. I was able to wait comfortably because of the parasol and water.
Frontline workers, including some in full protective gear, were kept cool by giant fans and temporary air conditioning units. In another part of the capital, the health center in Gangnam-gu district has come up with new ways to reduce people's waiting time outside.
Waiting to get tested under this scorching heat could be tough for many people, but to speed things up, people can scan this QR code right here and fill out their personal information ahead of time.
Meaning they can now complete the health questionnaire online using their smartphones.
We realised a few things that aren't really working well for people as we've been conducting COVID-19 tests for a year. In the past, people used to register their information on paper, but we introduced a QR system to test people more quickly and safely.
The health authority have said that when heatwave warnings are issued, testing centers can change their operating hours so that they don't run during the hottest times of the day. Cheonghae, Arirang News.
There's a heat wave in North Korea too this week. The North Korea Central Television said Wednesday that some areas are getting up to 38 degrees Celsius. The party-run newspaper Nodong Shinmun had a report on the regime's efforts to prevent damage to farms because the North is already struggling with a food crisis. In other news, the number 2 diplomats from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan met today in Tokyo for talks on boosting three-way cooperation on a variety of issues. For one thing, they agreed to work together on issues related to North Korea. Yoon Jung-min reports.
South Korea, the U.S., and Japan agreed to work together on Korean Peninsula issues at a vice ministerial meeting on Wednesday in Tokyo. Speaking at a press conference afterwards, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman said the Seoul-Washington-Tokyo cooperation has sent a clear message to the North.
That close coordination sends a very critical message to North Korea in that we are together and shoulder to shoulder in our approach to this policy. The United States has made it clear that we are ready to engage with North Korea. They know that. We hope they respond positively.
Seoul's Vice Foreign Minister Choi Jong-gun said they exchanged views on the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, stressing the need for trilateral cooperation because it's an issue that takes a long time to resolve. Japan's Vice Foreign Minister Takeo Mori stressed the importance of implementing UN Security Council resolutions on North Korea while asking for cooperation to resolve the issue of North Korea's abduction of Japanese citizens 4 decades ago. This was the first three-way vice ministerial meeting in 4 years, and it came as Seoul-Tokyo relations hit a fresh low following recent inappropriate remarks by a senior Seoul-based Japanese diplomat about President Moon Jae-in, as well as a series of historical and territorial issues. Both the South Korean and Japanese vice foreign ministers have agreed to continue dialogue.
Regarding a visit to Japan by our president and the summit between our two countries, I would like to reaffirm that we will continue to make efforts to resolve our pending issues based on the achievements that have been made at the working level.
The three diplomats also discussed issues related to Myanmar, climate change, global health, and the economic recovery. In a readout, the U.S. State Department said they affirmed the need to maintain an inclusive, free, and open Indo-Pacific in opposition to any instability in the East China Sea. Having wrapped up the trilateral meeting, U.S. Deputy Secretary Sherman heads to Seoul for a meeting with South Korean Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong on Thursday and separate talks with her Korean counterpart Choi on Friday. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.